So if you look at the current seizure stats in FY22, we've already seized 13,000 pounds of fentanyl, largely at the southwest border. So it's really been devastating. The fentanyl really epidemic, according to the CDC, there's been 108,000 overdose deaths in 2021.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for the privilege of testifying before the committee today. Every single day when I walk into DEA headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, I walk past the Faces of Fentanyl memorial wall that we have built. Starting last summer, we asked families across the United States if they wanted to share with us a photo of one of their loved ones that they had lost to fentanyl poisoning. We started with about 100 photos in the first week last May. Today, there are 4,895 photos that line our headquarters walls at DEA in Arlington. The wall is a memorial to the lives that have been lost, and it is a call to action for the men and women of DEA that at this moment in time, we have to do everything we can to save American lives. The youngest person on that wall is Serenity Faith, forever 17 months old, and the oldest is James Cox, forever 70 years old. Those are just some of the lives lost. And we know that between August of 2021 and August of 2022, 107,735 American lives were lost to drug poisoning. Perhaps the most important thing that I can tell this committee today is that we know who is responsible. The Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco or CJ&G cartel, both cartels in Mexico, are responsible for the vast majority of fentanyl that is coming into the United States. It is why DEA has made defeating those two cartels our top operational priority. To explain a little more, those two cartels dominate the entire global fentanyl supply chain. They start in China, where they are purchasing precursor chemicals to make fentanyl. They then take those chemicals into Mexico, where they are mass producing fentanyl. First, fentanyl powder. And second, they are pressing a great deal of that powder into fake prescription pills in Mexico. Those pills look identical to real American and international medicines, things like oxycodone, Percocet, Adderall, or Xanax, but they have no real medicine in them. They are fentanyl and filler. The cartels then move the fentanyl powder and the fake pills into the United States. They sell a lot of it on social media and in other ways across our country. We are now seizing fentanyl in all 50 states, and it is the deadliest drug threat our country has ever faced.
And welcome back to another episode of Homeland Security Off the Record. Interesting topic today with my two longtime friends and colleagues, Dr. Godfrey Garner, retired U.S. Special Forces, his bio, and the bio of my other friend and colleague, Pat McGlynn, retired U.S. Army Major, Military Intelligence. His bio, full bio, is below. This is an interesting topic, and one that's certainly of concern right now. Fentanyl and its introduction into the United States, how it's getting into the United States, and why China is important in this. I want to read, actually, it should be classified as a weapon of mass destruction, and that's what Pat is going to talk about. But I want to say something real quick. March 28th, 2022. Congressional Research Service report, illicit fentanyl and weapons of mass destruction. It reads, I'll just read the first paragraph. As synthetic opioid overdose deaths in the United States reach historic levels, some policy stakeholders have sought U.S. action in designating fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. Such calls have also prompted congressional interest. Although a statutory designation of fentanyl as a WMD does not appear necessary for additional executive branch action to address fentanyl as an illicit drug or chemical weapon, Congress may consider developing legislation to approve upon perceived shortcomings in the U.S. government's approach to addressing fentanyl. As a matter of background, the Congressional Research Service said various observers draw comparisons between fentanyl abuse and weapons of mass destruction. For example, the congressionally mandated Commission on Combating Synthetic Opioid Traffic assessed in February 2022 that, quote, in terms of loss of life and damage to the economy, illicit synthetic opioids have the effect of a slow motion weapon of mass destruction. Links to these will be in the description below. Congressional Research Service, January 31st, 2023, regarding the 2023 North American Leaders Summit, issues for the 118th Congress. This relates to Mexico hosting the 10th North American Leaders Summit in Mexico City this past January 9th and 10th, with President Biden, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Congressional Research Service notes in its summary of that summit, the summit did not address immediate concerns of policymakers regarding record levels of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border or escalating fentanyl overdose deaths. Pat, where are we?
The title of this presentation is China's Undeclared War on the U.S. And specifically, I want to call it its undeclared drug war. With that in mind, we'll move forward from there. I need to get to where I can present. All right. You should see 4 square corners with fentanyl, various things. I intend to point out that fentanyl is not a war using fentanyl as the main chemical agents being waged, but it's being waged on a civilized society's battlefield. That the platform is capitalism. The enemy is China. The agent is fentanyl, and the tactic is chemical warfare. Now, I'll put this up real quick because it's been seen a lot. It's been attributed to Lenin. It's an old saying: the capitalists will sell us the rope that will hang them with. It is very true in this particular subject matter. Chinese are selling an illicit drug, and they are killing the American population to the tune of hundreds of thousands. It depends on how you look and how you break the numbers down. It could be over 400,000. I think in the first slide, I listed only 200,000. That is the most conservative estimate that I've seen out there of how many people have died due to the use of fentanyl. All right, let's go start with a definition of war. This is a definition used by the dictionaries. I'm just going to accept it. I'm not going to get philosophical about it or anything. I'm just going to take it as it is. It's a long-standing conflict between 2 or more groups over resources, land, cultural differences, or other matters of contention. Let's start with long-standing. I intend to show that for over more than 10 years, this war has been going on. I'm going to show that fentanyl, notice in the conservative estimate, I have it here around 250,000. Compare it to the deaths in other wars. There, in the definition of war, there really isn't a body count, but you can see how well fentanyl falls almost at the top of the list. Is it an armed conflict? I'll show you that it is an armed conflict. These are common weapons of armed conflicts. I have everything from tanks to catapults to nerve agents and artillery shells. Fentanyl is a chemical agent, and I'll show you how it should be seen that way also. Chemical agents are toxic agents, or they can be incapacitating agents. Fentanyl is both. It can, in small, micrograms, It can be an incapacitating agent in just a few grams. In less than a gram, it could be enough to kill you. Points of ingestion: fentanyl can be inhaled, it can be ingested, and then you can use certain other things, but it's a little bit of a stretch. But you can be, absorbed through the skin. Now, as we talk about various times that chemical warfare has been used in our century, I have a few examples. I have the Novichok nerve agent used by the Russians to kill various dissidents. I have a scene on the Iraqi battlefield where the Iraqis used chemical agents, mustard gas, against the Iranians, and just most recently ISIS using mustard agents against the Syrians. Historically, chemical agents, everybody thinks it's something that just happened since World War I. We've used chemical agents on the battlefield, humans have, for thousands of years, all the way back to the 6th century BC. The Assyrians used a toxic alkaloid called ergot that comes from rye wheat. In real dry weathers, this alkaloid will form on the wheat. They would knock these ergots off, the dark substances attached to the wheat kernel, and they would bind it together in a solution, and they would introduce it to people's food or water supplies. It would cause hallucinations, it would cause nausea, vomiting, and it could even kill you. Poisoning of wells is also a common thing that's been done against not just enemy invading armies, but also against the population of an area. If you did not want a particular tribe or group to inhabit an area, you'd poison all the wells in that area. Most common subject of that being done was by Prince Vad the Impaler, also known as Dracula in modern literature. He was very common practice of his to poison the wells that would be used by the Ottoman Turks when they invaded Hungary. But most recently, in the last 100 years, where a superpower, not just a small European country, but where a superpower was involved, were the Opium Wars. The Opium Wars took place in China in the 18th century. There was a couple episodes of that taking place where Britain and France basically forced opium onto the people of China. The Chinese did not want to trade with the Western powers except for silk and tea, and they wanted to trade silver. The Western powers did not want to use silver, so they used opium to hook the nation on the drug, and they would come into the island of Singapore, which was close enough to the mainland China that the mainland China fishing junks could get to it, and they would trade off the coast of China in the land of Singapore, the island of Singapore, and they would get tea and China from the dishes from the Chinese fishing junks, and they would load red tar opium that was grown in India and Pakistan and Afghanistan and hook the entire population. The Chinese did not like that, and they went to war with the Brits and France too for a little while to stop bringing it in, but they were overwhelmed by the superior firearms of the Western powers, and the Chinese government was forced into a trade agreement where they had to accept opium as a common trade good. That left a very bad taste in the Chinese government's mouth. They never liked that, and to this very day, they train their diplomats to understand that you cannot be weak, because if you're weak, you will be abused by the Western powers. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the reason why they have made such an effort to become a superpower. So let's talk a little bit about the fentanyl facts. It's a synthetic opioid. It's medically used to treat severe pain. It's 100 times more potent than morphine. Okay, it's deadlier than heroin. One pill, 2 milligrams, or 10 to 15 grains can kill. I'm showing it in a little picture off to the right there. That's a penny next to it. That's how many grains of this opioid, synthetic opioid, it takes to kill someone.
The ultra-potency of synthetic opioids, 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, means that even slight exposures to these weaponized toxins can be incapacitating or lethal.
It's been found like this in 26 states. All right. It has various precursors and solvents. I'm going to go through this once. The only reason why I'm going through it is because part of the ways the Chinese and the Mexican drug cartels have shifted their way to get around the subject is they're no longer shipping finished fentanyl into Mexico. They're sending in the reagents, the precursors, and the solvents, and they're making it themselves in Mexico, then shipping it north. So they use aniline, butyryl, piperidone, proponic anhydride, propanyl chloride, and valeryl chloride. These are all constituents of fentanyl. So where does it come from? It's made in large-scale industrial chemical plants in China. As we learned in the recent pandemic, a huge amount of the pharmaceuticals, the precursor agents of the pharmaceuticals that we use in our drugs in the United States and in other countries are produced in India and in China. Now there's legislation going on to change that, but because those chemicals have a natural purpose of being shipped in as fentanyl precursors, and oxycodone is an example. It is a synthetic opioid. We get that from China, the precursor chemicals. So the fentanyl just gets mixed in. The precursors for it gets mixed in with the other precursors, and is shipped into the United States, and it doesn't raise anybody's eyebrows. It's being hidden under the radar in this form. The two major ports it comes out of China is Shanghai and Qingdao. This is how it flows through Mexico. 75% of the fentanyl that comes to the United States comes through San Diego. This comes from the DEA. That's the source of this information. The maritime ports handle large volumes of merchandise and a significant portion of the international trade, particularly between Asia and Mexico. So they're logistically ideal for both legal and illegal trading of illicit substances. The Pacific coast ports of Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas, in particular on the west coast, absorb the fentanyl and fentanyl precursors coming into Mexico. Then they dispatch them immediately to storage and production points around Mexico, Guadalajara, and Culiacán. It also comes through the Port of Val on the East Coast, one port, and I forget the name of it, but it's a very, very small trickle in. The precursors are converted to fentanyl. Pure fentanyl is also laced with fake prescription pills, and the different forms of fentanyl are then shipped with other drugs, although not mixed with them, in in mixed batches of drugs that are transported by land, air, and sea to the U.S. border. Now, a little more in depth here. When the drugs come in, they're not hiding them. The drugs have stamped on the bill of lading where it came from. All right, it isn't hidden at all. It's just when it leaves that port facility, it doesn't end up where the bill of lading says it's going to. It's diverted at that point, and it ends up going to a factory owned by the cartels.
Just as a matter of clarification, these cartels have morphed into more than just drug trafficking. They're transnational criminal organizations that are involved in all kinds of criminal enterprises.
They're truly organized crime. Okay, they have developed legal businesses to hide their activities. Okay. I'll show you a simple explanation how this would work. I come in, I'm a customs official in a port in Mexico. I take my barcode reader, I read the side of the Connex that, is holding all the drugs. And then I pull a little barcode out of my back pocket and I scan it. That says it's going to the proper location that was on the bill of lading. Are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
Did that Connex of illegal drugs, did it move? Did it do anything? No, but in the system, it says it was delivered where it was supposed to go to some pharmaceutical company somewhere. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So the system says it went where it's supposed to be. Reality, it just disappeared. Then a semi truck comes up, picks it up, and it takes it to a different location and is processed. So I just took, in that one motion, probably enough chemicals to kill half of the United States. And I just sent it to a location. You don't know where that is. Now, can we find out where it is? Yes. In fact, Godfrey and I wrote a white paper on, bringing biometrics to the battlefield in Afghanistan, because there's, so many heroin and other drugs were being transferred across the borders and stuff, and there was really no accountability. And we, wrote a white paper and suggested that we just start putting, trackers on all of these connexes as they go, so we can see where they start and where they end. And these things, they transmit to, this is what the United States military uses to transmit where their supplies are going. So they know exactly where their supplies are in the supply system. And all we'd have to do is use the same thing, and it would transmit on a regular basis to a satellite exactly where that connex goes. So to say that the American government does not have the wherewithal to track this stuff, I would say that's not true. And because we've done it and we do it all the time to track our own stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to demonstrate that through this discussion is, as long as Americans see fentanyl as a drug problem and not a chemical warfare agent, we're going to continue to have people die. And we don't start using some of the tools that we have available to us, it's just going to get worse and worse, because it makes it, by the fact that it's 50 times more deadly than heroin. Let's think about this. Heroin, it takes some work to produce heroin, okay? You have to grow the opium poppy. You have to harvest the opium poppy. You have to pull it into a red tar opium beginning thing. You take it through the morphine stages with various chemicals. You finally take it to white crystal heroin. That will cost you about $2,000 in materials to have that go on. We're talking $200, actually more like $20 worth of chemicals to make a kilo of fentanyl. You see the difference in the value of that. Almost no upfront cost to produce it, and all that profit on the back end.
I want to point this out. This comes again from the Congressional Research Service's March 28, 2022 report, Illicit Fentanyl and Weapons of Mass Destruction. Under selected proposals for Congress, it refers to the role of the Department of Homeland Security's CWMD office, and it says on February 22nd, 2019, the Department of Homeland Security's Assistant Secretary for Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction circulated a memorandum advocating the use of appropriate CWMD authorities against fentanyl. Made public by task and purpose, the memorandum explains that the CWMD office, scheduled to terminate in December 2023, could apply its assets and capabilities to the fentanyl problem through the lens of WMD. The Homeland Security Act of 2002, as amended, which established the CWMD office and DHS, however, lacks a provision for classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
Tony, can I throw something in here?
Absolutely.
Okay, one of the things that mistakes that we're making, and you can't get away from this. I know we're not getting into this discussion particularly, but you can't get away from this. It's a political issue. It has to do with politics to a great extent, because for several reasons. But fentanyl, especially the way Pat's just gone through and explained it, it's a national security issue.
Absolutely.
And what we're doing as a nation, we're looking at it as a social problem, because when you look at it as a social problem, you can't really blame it on anybody. You can't blame the presence of the substance that's causing the problem on any one person. It's a social issue that's evolving based on human nature, like heroin and opium use and marijuana use and all these other things throughout history. If you look at it as a national security issue, which it is, then you can blame it on someone. You can blame it on an administration, and in particular the Biden administration, because it wasn't a problem under the Trump administration or any other administration prior to that point. So when you get to that point, you have to be able to assign responsibility to someone, and the current administration, the current control of the country is just not going to allow that. So you look at it as a social issue, a social problem, a behavioral issue, and
you throw money at it. And you just throw money at it. And you say, I've done all these good things because I can show how much money I've thrown at it. In reality, you haven't changed anything.
And it doesn't make any difference whether the money thrown at it works or not. Nobody's going to get blamed for it. It's just somebody tried to do something good and it didn't work. And but when you look at it as a national security issue, as a weapon that's being used against us as a nation.
By China.
Exactly. Our adversary, or one of our adversaries, that's a weapon that's being used, like Pat's been explaining, then someone has to take responsibility, and someone has to do something about it, and someone has to suffer the blame for it if they don't do anything about it. Then the administration is not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes along with the report you just read.
Yeah, and this was March 2022.
Yeah.
The link to this Congressional Research Service report, Fentanyl as a Weapon of Mass Destruction, will be in the description. I just wanted to point some of those few things out. Let's get back to your slides, Pat.
Well, while we're here, let me point out something here also. It depends on who's in the White House and who's in Congress decides who gets listed as a terrorist. Okay?
Yeah.
That's a real common thing. Oh, well, you know, this group, well, they're freedom fighters. They're not terrorists. Okay, they're this, that, and the other thing. The other guys have a point of view, whatever. The bottom line is, it's killing people because you give it another name so that it's more politically correct. Does not take the deadliness away from it. This is a good example of you cannot look at this thing as anything but a national threat, a threat to the population of the United States that is not just killing one or two people, it's on a wholesale level, okay? Hundreds of thousands of people die. We're talking major world war level of death, okay? And we've got to look at it exactly like that. If we don't, we're doing it at our own peril.
And first responders have died from this just by accidentally
Exposed to it.
Yeah, Pat mentioned a while ago.
Knowing that they had.
Yeah, Pat mentioned a while ago the possibility of it being absorbed through the skin. That's proven for the first responders that
Right,
it
because they make a fentanyl, a legitimate medical fentanyl patch. For pain medication.
Yeah, they do. And in fact, the drug I'm taking right now is a synthetic opioid. I'm taking, OxyContin for the spinal surgery I had, and they don't do it anymore. They don't get it from opium anymore. It's all synthetic. Okay, whether it's used pharmaceutically or it's used on the street, it's too cheap to create the drug synthetically. So that's what they do. It is a matter of business convenience. Okay. I'll go back to the slides. Go ahead.
One more, Pat. Let me throw one more thing out too before you go forward with this. You got to keep in mind that if China gets desperate, if they invade Thailand, for instance, and we come along and say we're going to jump in and get involved in this, we're going to defend Thailand, and China doesn't want us to do that, all they have to do is just put the word out to us through channels or whatever that they're going to bump up the potency of the drug just by slightly increasing it. And
it's already been done.
It's
already been done. I didn't mention
it can be done a little bit more, and they can wipe out the half of the country in a matter of a few weeks.
No, if you Google carfentanil right now, you'll find that it's 100 times more potent than fentanyl.
Which raises a question: can this be aerosolized as a weapon?
Funny you should ask. 2002.
Well, I think that way. We all do.
Yeah, in 2002, October of 2002. A group of 50 Chechens took over a movie theater in Moscow. The Spetsnaz element that took that back from the terrorist pumped aerosolized fentanyl into the building.
Yeah.
And
use very primitive means to do it too.
That's interesting. I did not remember that being fentanyl that they had pumped into that theater.
And 117 people died.
Yeah.
Because it did not discriminate one way or the other.
Yeah.
In fact, they didn't understand even when they did it, they didn't even understand the first aid aspects of it, because when they brought their people out, they had gotten dosed by it. They laid them on the ground and they drowned in their own fluids, and they tilted them up, set their backs up against a wall or a light post or something. A lot fewer of them would have died, but they were using something they had never tested before, and
they didn't know what to do with it,
and they killed them. But basically killed them all. Let God sort them out. Does the government really want to stop the fentanyl flow into the U.S.? I have the Department of Justice, I have the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I have the seal for the United States Customs up here. All right. Now, what I'm going to get into by talking about these three guys here is if we really wanted to stop the flow, we would control our borders. We're not doing that. If we really wanted to stop fentanyl big time in the United States, we would have all of these internet programs programmed to negatively influence people on the usage of fentanyl. All right. I did a basic little test for myself just to see what would come up. I just took a search engine. I took the Google search engine, and I just typed in a couple words, and I would have thought it would come up immediately. A whole bunch of stories on this. I just typed in China and fentanyl. Okay. Now, what you're seeing before you is how a search engine works. Okay, is you user query on the left. It engages a little bot that goes out there, crawls out, and finds the information associated with the words that you just put in, and it scours the internet and brings things back and puts them on a screen for you. This is what I got: a list of from the DEA and facts about the DEA, and but nowhere in there did I find China associated with the top 4 of these things. All right. And I would have thought for sure they would be pointing out very hard that this is all coming from China, but China was left off the list. So basically, in order to find this, find how the China connection to fentanyl works, you would have to have almost the whole thing. Because I just put up, if you see at the top, I put in fentanyl and DEA. China didn't come up. All right. I did it again, but I put fentanyl, DEA, and China. I did get it to show up once, and it was just mentioned, oh, by the way, the precursors come from China, in one of the top 4 that came up. All right. Right now, that tells me that the way the information is structured on the internet does not want to, it basically is hiding the China fentanyl connection. All right. It should come up immediately. I shouldn't have to put the connection in to find out that connection exists. You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, some years ago, it was widely broadcast that Google, the parent company of Alphabet, was leaving China, but it's back now. In 2010, it gave up access to an enormous market, and there were more than twice as many people on the internet in China as there were residents in the United States. The number of Chinese internet users kept growing and at a rate that it would far surpass the United States. So Google said, if we stay out of China, we're going to lose that market. So they went back into China, and they've basically done everything that China has told them to do with their search engine. Now, is that money coming from China directly to Google? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that you have an American company kowtowing to an adversary so they can be in their market.
We know how those things work, but it's interesting that you're pointing out that Google is apparently deliberately blocking,
hiding the link,
various search screens. Yeah,
hiding the links between China and opioids. Now, according to NPR, under international pressure, China's government banned the production and sale of fentanyl. Okay, so back in 2019, all right, under the Trump administration, Trump forced China to avoid sanctions. They had to list fentanyl and its variants as illicit drugs. Okay, they didn't do it on their own. They did it only under duress. Okay, now one would think, oh, well, that's great. Everything's good now. But they're not really enforcing it. Are you following me? They're just instead of not sending, fentanyl in the finished form to Mexico, they're sending it in the precursor form, and the Mexican cartels are creating it.
Right.
So notice on the picture there, right about where 2019 is, it's just been going up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I say the proof is in the pudding. Yeah, they may have put it on the books as a law, but has it changed anything? Well, let me take it another step further here. I call Purdue Pharma the devil's ally. Here you have an American company. They recently, I think in 2019, got served a judgment against them for tens of billions of dollars because they were purposely hooking Americans on opioids. Now, what goes around seems to come around. Believe it or not, a sub-company, a spinoff of Purdue Pharma is Mundi Pharma. It's big in the Asian market like Purdue was in the U.S. market, okay? And right now, it's causing the number of users in China to go up. So capitalism is now the platform that is getting Chinese civilians hooked on opioids again. And it's a Western company that's doing it. So real quick, I'm going to show you the deadly link between social media and fentanyl. You can use these mechanisms, these social agents. They have little keywords, code words, and things like that. So once you are hooked on it in China or in the United States, you can use these social mechanisms. You could go through and by code, you can order your drugs. Okay? These social media mechanisms are being used to place orders for fentanyl, Oxycontin, and other things.
For whom?
That platform. Okay, let's just look. They don't use Gmail as much, but like Twitter. You can use Twitter. You go online, you tweet out to one of your followers, okay, on Twitter, and you say, I need, 3 pictures of Sandy Koufax for my baseball collection. Well, that turns out to be a word substitution code that gets you 3 dosages of some flavor of drug. And
so it's peer-to-peer that's doing this. It's not actually
that's right.
An app where you have a bunch of people advertising drugs for sale, like the dark web at one point.
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
they're using that platform to do it on a huge scale, okay? And they're now finding out, they're tracking these folks down and stuff. They're actually exploiting their cell phones and stuff when somebody gets collected up, and they're finding out the words that they're using. The police intel agencies, Department of Justice, and so on and so forth, they're finding they're using these things, and a lot of the times the drugs get mailed to their front door. So it's not this person that goes out to get drugs from some shady guy in a trench coat in the park somewhere. He's just pulling up, his, social agent on his cell phone, and he's ordering his drugs using his code words, and they end up being delivered to his front doorstep. So what I'm trying to point out is the cartels aren't just organized crime. They're 21st century organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
That they're every aspect of selling a product. Like if I was going to go after children, I would use bright colors in my ergonomic pitches. Okay. I would get I would go after the kids that live in rich neighborhoods because mommy and daddy have money and can buy my product.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interesting.
And so they're doing market analysis. Okay. And they're leveraging that market analysis. They're getting the best, cheapest way to distribute the drug. And because social media has that type of metadata built into each of their platforms, it's there for their, it's part of the benefit of having a Instagram account, having a Twitter account, having whatever those, that you're paying for that account, but you also get access to that demographic metadata. It's high tech, man. It's high tech. I was in the old days. You say high speed, low drag. This is high tech, and they're doing everything they can to. We're like the gumshoe police officers that are still trying to catch the guy that's selling it to the kids in the park, and that guy's small potatoes. Okay. Yeah. The guy that's selling, fentanylized Lego parts, he's the 21st century guy.
Hey, Tony, something else too that we need to consider is, if this is so easy to bring us down using this drug, this fentanyl drug, why aren't other countries subject to the same threat we are? Well, most people understand this if they think it through a little bit, but the United States doesn't punish offenders harshly. We don't punish drug offenders, users at all. We don't punish distributors very seriously because of our social issues that we're dealing with now.
No deterrent.
Right. And other countries, they don't put up with that. Our greatest adversary is China, Russia, some other countries that you might name up there at the top. They chop people's hands off for dealing in drugs, Trump was announcing or talking about his new platform running for election next time, regardless of whether you are a Trump supporter or not. The fact of the matter is he raised some eyebrows by coming out and advocating the death penalty for drug pushers, and everybody freaked out over that. Well, the fact of the matter is that's standard practice in other countries, and they don't have that vulnerability that we have in the United States. And just like we were saying a little bit earlier, all they have to do if they want to completely dominate the country, if not wipe us out altogether, is just bump up the potency again. And Pat said they're already looking at doing that, or they're working on it now, or distribute it aerially. And I don't know how easy that would be to do. I know it was in the theater incident that Pat alluded to a while ago, but I don't know how easy it would be to aerially distribute the drug across the country, but it doesn't sound like it would be really difficult.
The more potent it is, the easier it gets.
Yeah, it'd be a chemical like that would be very easy to aerosolize.
Well,
so we're really vulnerable, extremely vulnerable.
Carfentanil is already on the street right now. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's spelled CARFENTANIL. It's just fentanyl with a I instead of a Y. But I'm going to go back a couple slides real quick. Purdue, they were owned by the Sackler family, probably evil incarnate. They had a spinoff company called Mundi Pharma, which they did in Asia, and Mundi Pharma has just, I think last year, had over $1 billion in sales. All right, and only thing they sell are synthetic opiates, and the number of people, I don't know if you are following in China, they have this problem with their younger generation. It's called the lying down generation.
Yes, I'm familiar with them.
Okay. They get out of college after mommy and daddy have put them through, years of college, and either they don't want to get a job or there aren't. And in this case, a lot of jobs have gone away because the economy's in the tank right now. But these people just sit around all day long and play on their cell phones, and a lot of them do drugs. And the number of people that are being turned into drug addicts is going through the roof. And it would behoove China to cooperate with the United States in our drug interdiction efforts, because it's going to hurt them more than it's going to hurt us, because a lot of people that are involved in distributing these drugs are Chinese, and they have shares in Mundi Pharma. So
Mundi Pharma was a spinoff from Purdue?
Yes, this. Yep. It was an umbrella, under the umbrella of Purdue Pharma.
Where's it domiciled?
It's listed as a limited British multinational research-based pharmaceutical company. Boy, that's a mouthful.
Interesting.
And they're in Singapore, Canada, Germany, and the United Kingdom.
By the way, Tony, another little thing too, what Pat was talking about, carfentanyl's there's already been a warning, a DEA warning issued about carfentanil to National Union. You could pick it up online too.
So basically what I've demonstrated for you gentlemen, that if you are not biased and you're open to, facts, the Chinese have come in under the radar. They're basically making the Americans think that, oh, this is just a social issue. Don't blame China for your social problems, your social issues. It's not.
And we're really involved in that.
Well, yeah, we are. And a lot of health, medical-based companies, they propagate that type of mentality because it's government contracts to run, rehab facilities and things like that. So it's big business, all right. And back to the Lenin statement, communism will sell capitalism the drug, the rope that they'll hang themselves with ultimately, and we're doing it. We're buying it. They're selling us poison, and we're willingly taking it.
Is China the only country that is manufacturing all the precursor chemicals that you alluded to earlier in your?
No, India makes some, but India doesn't have the same problem that China does about the chemicals just disappearing in the in the trade traffic. You know what I'm saying?
I got you. Yeah.
India understands, the dangers that come with, having half your country addicted. So they're one of those countries, like Godfrey was saying, they have very harsh penalties for drug selling and, making drugs and using drugs. But China has those same rules, but they're not focused on them. Are you following what I'm saying?
Oh, yes.
But they'll get focused on them, I imagine, in a few years, because you can't have a multi-billion-dollar company, passing drugs out in your population before it starts getting up on the radar and you're starting noticing it. Now, they may not care that much, okay, that they're dying, but they should, because the ones that are killing are not the older folks, it's the younger folks, okay? And the younger demographic in China, that's what they're depending upon to pull them out of this really bad demographic slump that they're in. China which
was already declining to begin with.
Exactly. So if they don't pay attention to this, it's just going to hasten the fall of their country. With other, strategic intel analysts, we'd have these conversations, over at DA, and we talk about these things. And the argument was always China's not going to make it past the 2030s, okay, because they're upside down on their demographics. What's going on right now, I don't think they're going to make it to 2030.
China is imploding. And
So-
we've talked about that before, but that's a longer story. But China is literally imploding.
Fellas, I'm going to have to go ahead and jump off now.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Tony, thanks very much for inviting me, and thanks to you, Pat, too.
All right, I'll let you go, buddy.
Okay, my friend. Thank you so much. Everyone, another episode of Homeland Security Off the Record. We will be back. Stay safe, well, and frosty. Until next time.